What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so we've got a very, very big Supreme Court case coming up, and there's a lot of liberals out there melting down over this. Of course, that's standard practice for Donald Trump's administration. Liberals melt down over just about everything. But you have a lot of people out there saying that Donald Trump is trying to take the voting rights away from black individuals in this country. And once again, they're conflating all kinds of different issues here, but that's not what's going on. What is actually happening is, at least as far as what I can interpret from this situation, is, over time, we've allowed for a lot of these congressional districts to be drawn up simply based upon race. And hang on just a second, that actually violates the Voting Rights Act. That violates the Civil Rights Act. So they're trying to rectify all these issues. And, traditionally, like I would say back in the day when these things were implemented, yeah, that was probably a good idea, right? So the United States today does not look the same as it did in 1965. So I think we need to implement some changes. And I think that's exactly what the Trump administration is doing. Check this out. Voting Rights Act faces near-death experience at U.S. Supreme Court. That is right. So they're putting the Voting Rights Act through their paces. Once again, like I said, there's been all this talk of redrawing the maps, the congressional maps, if you will. And there was a lot of talks about these black congressional districts. Well, that should not be a thing. There should not be black congressional districts. It should just be congressional districts, right? You cannot draw up a congressional map based upon race. That violates the Civil Rights Act, as a matter of fact. Let's get into this, because this is quite the lengthy article, because, once again, there's a lot to explain here. The Voting Rights Act, a landmark law barring discrimination in voting, was a product of the U.S. Civil Rights era sought by Nobel Peace Prize recipient Martin Luther King, passed by Congress and signed by Democratic President Lyndon Johnson in 1965. 6 decades later, it faces its greatest threat with the U.S. Supreme Court, which has a 6-3 conservative majority, looking poised to hollow out one key section after gutting a different one in 2013. Now, once again, this is bias showing through in this news article right here. It's not a 6-3 conservative majority, like I've always said. It's really, you got 3 far leftists, you got 3 people, 3 centrists, if you will, and then you've got 3 conservatives. That's what the Supreme Court looks like. That's fully balanced, if you ask me. But you ask a far leftist, of course the center is going to be conservative, because why? Because they're not far left. Because they're not way over there. And anything that is not far left is intolerant to the far left and is far right and should be ostracized from polite society. The court is expected to rule in the coming months in a case argued on Wednesday concerning a map delineating U.S. House of Representatives districts in Louisiana. The conservative justices signaled they could undercut the law's Section 2, which bars voting maps that would result in diluting the voting power of minorities, even without direct proof of racist intent. That is right. So if you draw up a map based upon race, even though that wasn't your intent, but you look at the map and it's like, okay, yeah, this is a black district. Yeah, you can't do that. In doing so, the court would not be striking down the Voting Rights Act, but the question is what would be left of the law after the court issues its decision. If the court further weakens Section 2, states and localities, including those with long histories of discrimination, could be free to draw maps that systematically silence Black, Latino, Native, and Asian American voters, said Sarah Brannon, Deputy Director of the American Civil Liberties Union Voting Rights Project. Now, she's going to say this. These people are very, very biased, and we know this. That is not going to dilute their voting power at all. As a matter of fact, it would remove discrimination from the electoral maps, from the congressional districts outright. It's not going to dilute anybody's voting power at all. You're still going to have the same amount of voting power. The maps are just not going to be drawn based upon your ethnicity, for crying out loud, right? Like Black, Latino, Hispanic, white, Native American, Asian American, Saudi American, doesn't matter, right? Those would not exist anymore. It would just be Americans. And that's it. Once again, these people, they tell you outright, oh, it's going to dilute the voting power of this certain group. Oh, you better fight for your rights. But hang on, just sit back and think about this for a second. Is it really diluting your voting power? Is that going to happen? Do you not have a vote anymore? No, as a matter of fact, you still do. It's just that these districts are not drawn up based upon those ethnicities. These people are insane. They go way out of their way to hide their racism, as a matter of fact. Black people make up about a third of the population in Louisiana, and white people make up a majority. The state has 6 U.S. House districts. Louisiana's Republican-led legislature added a second black majority district in response to a judge's ruling that an earlier map it had approved containing just one black majority district likely harmed black voters in violation of Section 2. How? They can't explain how it harmed black voters. Like, once again, this is all incumbent. Like, it's all based upon the fact that black voters are going to vote Democrat. That's what they're telling you. That you better not leave the plantation and vote Republican, even though it was the Republicans that fought a civil war to free the slaves. It's insane, right? The South is the party of the Democrats. The old South, at least. The Confederacy was the Democratic Party, folks. A group of white voters sued to block the map. They argued that the map was guided too heavily by race in violation of constitutional provisions promising equal protection under the law, and that the right to vote cannot be denied on the basis of race. Those provisions were ratified to safeguard the rights of black Americans following the Civil War of 1861 through 1865 that ended the practice of slavery in southern states, including Louisiana. Yes, that is true. But back then, black people didn't have voting rights. So once again, they're conflating all kind of different issues here to try to bludgeon you over the head, to try to make you think, once again, that Republicans and these white voters are racist. No, they're trying to end discrimination. That's what's going on here. They're trying to stop these maps being drawn based upon skin color, for goodness sakes, which is ridiculous. President Donald Trump's administration sided with the white voters. See what they're trying to do here? They're trying to draw lines. No, he sided with voters. Doesn't matter what their skin color is. This is what these politicians do, especially Democrats. I'm not going to say Republicans don't do this, but Republicans generally only do this in response to what Democrats are doing, because Democrats want to say, oh, well, let's place you in a box. Let's place you in a box. Let's place you in a box. Okay, so you need your rights. You need your rights, and y'all don't get any rights, as a matter of fact. That's what Democrats are trying to do, and Republicans are like, no, let's erase all of this. Let's just be fair about this. That's it. It's insane what they do. It stopped short of calling for invalidating Section 2, but it proposed a framework for cases involving Section 2 that would clamp down on excessive consideration of race and give states more leeway to accomplish race-neutral principles, such as protecting lawmakers already serving in Congress. That's fascinating. Justice Department lawyer Hashim Mupan told the justices, under the Constitution, the problem is not the mere consideration of race in districting. The problem is when race subordinates traditional neutral principles and is the factor that cannot be compromised. The framework that Mupan promoted would supplant a test set by the Supreme Court in a 1986 case called Thornburg versus Gingles for determining when an electoral map has sufficiently diminished minority voting power to be deemed unlawful. The reason why Section 2, as it's being construed in Gingles, is a problem is it is saying that you have to create a district for black Democrats that you would never create for white Democrats in a Republican state, Mupan said. That is exactly what Democrats are absolutely doing, or they're attempting to do this. The Justice Department's approach would effectively gut Section 2, according to George Washington University law professor Spencer Overton. And once again, this is another micro-manipulation tactic. What they'll do, they'll give you one side, right? They'll give you what the administration is wanting to do, and then they'll tell you, oh, well, this is the apocalypse, according to this person. If adopted, Section 2 cases would still exist on paper, but would be nearly impossible to win, Overton said. Courts could dismiss claims before trial, giving state legislators free rein to entrench their power and sideline voters of color. Once again, that's another biased take. That's not what it would do. It would remove that aspect from consideration in these districts. In a process called redistricting, the boundaries of legislative districts across the United States are reconfigured every decade to reflect population changes as measured by the national census. Redistricting typically is carried out by state legislatures. The Trump administration's framework would impose new evidentiary requirements on black voters who sue over how electoral maps are drawn. Among other things, they would need current statistics showing that a legislature discriminated based on race rather than party affiliation. In the United States, where more than 80% of black voters back Democratic candidates, decoupling race and party affiliation in such a way is difficult. No, it is not. It is absolutely not difficult. You just don't take race into consideration. That's it. That's all we're asking for. We're not asking for white majorities everywhere. No, that's not it, folks. That is not what is going on. But that's what Democrats are trying to lead you to believe, that it's the apocalypse for black civil rights in this country, for black voting rights. Oh, we're not going to be able to vote anymore, but that's just absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. You can still vote against your own interests if you want to, which just about everybody does anyway, whether you're white, black, Latino, or Martian. Doesn't matter, right? You pretty much vote against your own interests whenever you vote for one of these career politicians. The Justice Department's approach would make it extremely difficult for Section 2 plaintiffs to win in jurisdictions where you have intense polarization like you do in the Deep South, said Travis Crum, a law professor at Washington University in St. Louis. I love how he tries to say that. And once again, this is kind of soft manipulation right here to try to make you think that, oh, the polarization is only in the Deep South. Folks, it's all over the country, and the polarization is not black and white. That is not the polarization, absolutely. It is basically what is real and what is fake. That's the polarization. The informed and the ill-informed. That's the polarization in this country. The Voting Rights Act prohibited discriminatory voting practices that were employed by many southern states, such as literacy tests, as a prerequisite to voting. It was enacted a year after Congress passed and Johnson signed into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibited discrimination on the basis of race and other factors in public accommodations, education, and employment. Right. So why wouldn't congressional districts be considered in with that? Why would we allow discrimination on the basis of race for anything? We shouldn't, folks. That's what DEI does. That's what affirmative action does, as a matter of fact. So the Voting Rights Act became more powerful in 1982 when Congress amended Section 2 to create what is called the results test, making it illegal to use election practices or procedures that had a discriminatory effect, regardless of their intent. But the Supreme Court in the 1990s began raising constitutional concerns about how the Voting Rights Act was being applied. For instance, in a 1995 case out of Georgia, it said it would impose its most rigorous and exacting standard of constitutional review whenever race is the predominant overriding factor, explaining how an electoral map was drawn. This also is a much different United States now than in 1965, and the Supreme Court has moved U.S. law dramatically rightward. Oh, is that so? Oh my God, these people are so biased. Has it moved it dramatically rightward? Right? Then in 1965, are you serious about that? Right? I'm sorry. I think you couldn't be gay in 1965. And yeah, that's normal now. It's just fine. I mean, let's talk about no-fault divorce, the whole trans movement. Everything is fine with that. I'm sorry. These people are freaking delusional. They just don't understand what reality is. To say that we are more right now than in 1965 is a freaking joke. It's not even anywhere close to reality. The court, in a 2013 case involving Alabama's Shelby County, gutted the Voting Rights Act requirement that states and localities with a history of racial discrimination receive federal approval to change voting laws. In another major race-related ruling, the court in 2013 rejected race consensus admissions policies long used by the U.S. colleges and universities to increase the enrollment of Black, Hispanic, and other minority students. Yes, affirmative action was a disaster, folks, right? It was needed at one point, right? When we got over our race relations issues in this country. But we're over that. The 1990s proved that. Like, I was brought up in an era where our most famous celebrities in this country, people like Bill Cosby, which is not so popular now, but you know what it is. It is what it is. Will Smith. You had like NWA, Tupac Shakur. You had all these black celebrities that were revered by people like me growing up. We looked up to these people. Can you say the same in 1965? No, you cannot. Once again, folks, these people are absurd. They think it's more racist now than it was back then. Are you freaking kidding me? Jeez, man, these people are insane. And Trump has made it a top priority to crack down on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs nationwide. Yes, because they're racist. The most sweeping ruling that the Supreme Court could issue in the Louisiana case would be to strike down Section 2. That was the approach advocated by Benjamin Aguinaga, Louisiana's Republican Solicitor General. Aguinaga said that the state has taken the position that Section 2, insofar as it requires race-based redistricting, is unconstitutional. That is right, because you cannot have race-based redistricting. That is discriminating on the basis of race and violates the Civil Rights Act. Conservative Justice Brett Kavanaugh, a Trump appointee who may be a key vote in the case, seemed to favor the administration's approach. I would have thought that solves a lot of concerns that you have identified, Kavanaugh told Aguinaga, referring to the Justice Department proposal. Some Republicans have said the court, if it does clamp down on Section 2 litigation challenging electoral maps on racial grounds, would be embracing the sort of colorblindness that they believe the Constitution demands. Yes, exactly. But what do you mean they believe? Don't you think that drawing a map based on race is like the furthest thing from colorblindness? These people are insane, y'all. The way the courts have interpreted Section 2 has almost created affirmative action for politicians, said Mark Mauser, an attorney for Dillon Law Group, which represents Republican political candidates. If the Supreme Court rules as many expect it in curbing Section 2, it will greatly reduce the number of lawsuits that have to happen, Mauser said. And it will increase the burden of proof on those challenging maps. Republicans, who currently hold a narrow majority in the House, stand to benefit from such an outcome perhaps as soon as next year's congressional elections. Two voting rights groups, Fair Fight Action and Black Voters Matter Fund, concluded that eliminating Section 2 would let Republicans redraw up to 19 districts nationwide in the 435 House seat House to favor their party. Yeah, because once again, Democrats have drawn up maps based on race to give themselves the advantage. Once again, we're playing on an unfair field here. We're getting bludgeoned over the head, being called racist, while we're sitting here watching the people calling us the racist implement racist policies. It's fascinating. And we're just saying, you can't implement those racist policies anymore. And then we're the bad guys? Are you serious? These people are insane, y'all. They really are. The ACLU's Brannon said it is hard to predict how the court will rule, and noted that the justices in 2013 upheld a judicial panel's finding that Alabama's Republican-drawn electoral map had diluted the voting powers of black voters in violation of Section 2. But they never did prove it.
right? How can you prove it dilutes the voting power of black voters, as a matter of fact? How? How do you go about proving that? You can't, because it's not going to dilute anybody's vote. But we will continue to fight for fair maps with whatever tools we have, Brandon said. That's funny. That is fascinatingly funny. These people, once again, they come up with very inventive ways of implementing racist ideas while making you think they're fighting for you, right? It's so fascinating to watch Democrats operate. They don't care about their own voters. You look at people like Jasmine Crockett, who we've seen video of her talking, right? She talks normally, or used to talk normally. And then when she got into Congress, she turns up the ratchet, makes herself sound more hood, I guess to relate more to a certain group, right? A certain group of people that I guess that's her own constituents. Once again, code switching. This is what Democrats do, folks. There was a study that came out, there's a very fascinating study that basically showed that liberals are like 4 or 5 times more likely, I forget the exact number, but 4 or 5 times more likely that to basically dumb down their speech when talking to minorities, essentially. That's what these college-educated liberals think of minorities. Think of people like me, that I'm not college-educated and I'm just an idiot. So they're going to dumb down their speech, right? It's fascinating. These people think that they're better than you. They think that their white savior is going to come in and save the day because the racist Republicans over here that fought a war. It makes no sense, folks, how they're conflating what happened during the Civil War. They're trying to say that they are the ones that saved the black slaves in this country. What? None of that makes any sense, folks. The first black politician in this country was a Republican. The Union was Republican. It's so fascinating, folks. And, there never was a party switch. That's just made up. Because when you think about what actually took place, you would have to take pretty much all politicians, all these racist Democrats in the South, just all of a sudden decide one day, we're going to become Republicans. Yeah, and then all the Republicans up north decided, look, get this is the unbelievable part, that all these Republicans up north that were, against all slavery and against race-based anything, right? They decided, we're going to identify as Republicans, or as Democrats now. We're going to identify as the racist slave party down here. Why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense. There was no party switch, folks. It never happened. It's a figment of their creating. They made up to try to get out from underneath their own Jim Crow nonsense. Yeah, Jim Crow nonsense. Yeah, that's what it is, folks. This is why they're always so intent on taking up for minorities out there in the country. They're always standing up and fighting the fight. Oh, we don't want to dilute the minorities' voting power, blah, 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 blah. And they'll say all the right platitudes to make you believe that they're fighting for you, when they're really not. If you go look at the voting records of many of these politicians, once again, they don't care. We just had, once again, Jasmine Crockett get on a podcast the other day. I saw this little clip where she's basically like, oh no, this is ridiculous. Let's do the maths on this, right? Democrats can't shut the government down. Anybody with a mind, right? Anybody with a basic civics course has looked into this and, okay, these appropriations, we need a 2/3 majority to pass any of this. Okay, Republicans don't have a 2/3 majority. Every single Republican voted to keep the government open. Now, who voted against keeping the government open? That's basically what you got to look at right here. Democrats. That's who shut the government down, because we needed Democratic votes to get us over the line, to get the 2/3 majority, to keep the government open. And they decided not to vote for this, folks. They decided not to vote for this. It is them with unreasonable demands of giving criminal aliens, because once again, the virtue signal is in full swing here. Oh, we're taking up for the rights of non-citizens. We're fighting for them. When it really takes away the purchasing power of American citizens, your purchasing power. Why do I say that? Because they have to print money. They have to spend in a deficit to cover under Medicare and Medicaid that is subsidized through the states, which these certain states, only blue states, actually subsidize the health care of the criminal aliens, and those states get subsidized by the federal government, which comes out of everybody's money, everybody's taxes, right? And they have to do that in a deficit, which means they have to print money, which means you put more money into circulation, which dilutes the purchasing power of the dollar. That is why deficit spending is so detrimental to this country. It is the main reason for inflation, and they want to blame inflation on Donald Trump. You can't do that. I'm sorry. Yeah, sure, the tariffs might make things go up, but that's not attributable to inflation, because that's a one-time thing, right? Inflation is the constant rate of the devaluing of your dollar. It's not a one-time, tariff expense, if you will. That you cannot attribute that to inflation. I'm sorry. That's not how inflation works, by the way. But I've gotten way off topic, so I want y'all to let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comments section. I've got another video to record, so you guys don't forget to smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. Share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. Click that join button. Sign up and become a member. That's the best way to help this channel expand and grow. And we need y'all's help, or I need y'all's help. It's not a we, it's just me. I need y'all's help, y'all. We really need to fight the good fight. And I'm here, I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to push back against the machine. And the best way I can do that is to get you guys on my side to help me push back and help me inform you guys about what's actually going on with nonsense like this, and expose the Democrats for what they actually are, racists. It is what it is, folks. That's all. You guys remember that God has a plan for everybody, and he loves each and every one of you out there. So y'all try to have a good day and stay legitical. Peace.